coming to what is our final Kindle Worlds panel. And this is a great audience. So I'm very happy to see so many appreciative fans here for not only the authors here today, but all the other authors who we opened up a tremendous platform. In many ways, the Kindle Worlds it was an experiment. It was an experiment on Amazon's part, and we were a very willing partner for this effort. I'm not going to suppose that everyone is deeply familiar with what the goal of Kindle Worlds was about, but so I'll just describe it briefly. It was an idea in the age of crowdsourcing to allow fans to exercise their own, creative visions and play with universes of characters. And at Hasbro, we decided that G.I. Joe would be a perfect universe of characters to turn over to the fans and let them contribute, let them take their visions and storytelling from across the entire history of G.I. Joe and basically write and give them a forum to publish their work. That was what Kindle Worlds was about. Now, Amazon, recently announced that the Kindle Worlds platform has gone away. I think it is effectively gone now.
Yeah, you can't post any more new content. The available stories will be there until July 16th, but yeah, you can't upload anything new.
They don't disappear from your reader if you buy them now. So buy them now.
So looking at the experiment, so this is a very novel and innovative approach for Amazon. Amazon is one of the world's most innovative companies, always thinking, and we applaud them for what they did because the results are nothing short of amazing. We had over 100 amazing G.I. Joe works created by an entire range of authors, and many of whom it was really the opportunity for them to write for the first time. And what a great way to get started is with characters you know or love or have always wanted to tell a story for. So I'm probably intruding on some of the things that the guys are going to talk about. But this is how, careers and get started. Maybe hobbies that turn into passions that turn into other things is starting with something that you have an idea about and then building from there. And without going too much further, I just want to thank all of our authors, and especially the ones here today. So Justin, Bill, Jim, and Dawn for your work, your creative output, and may it live on forever in some fashion. So thanks. I'll turn it over to you guys.
And again, I want to actually thank you for coming today. We're going to spend a couple minutes briefly introducing ourselves and some of the work that we've done. Talk about how it's really led as a springboard to some other creative projects that we've done. We'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, and then we have a special surprise or two at the end. So this is actually our fourth Kindle Worlds panel. We launched in Springfield. We've had really great panelists teaching every time. Many of them are returning today. We were there last year in Orlando. And of course, we want to give a special shout out to Daryl. Big thanks to him. The only person I know who can look at Harrison Ford and say, so you've got a couple action figures too, huh? So, I guess I'll go first. My name is Bill Nedrow. Just a little bio on me, some of my writing inspirations, especially during Hama. I'm really informed that most of the writing we'll talk about today. I got started with a novel called First Salvo, which set in about 1982 and featured the original G.I. Joe cast, the original 14 members. Like Hama's work, it really kind of delves into more historical fiction. It starts a couple chapters in Vietnam and explains how Cobra got formed and then how the government responded to that. And then what I ended up doing was each successful novel, that's why I like writing, I can edit. I would bring in the next generation, the next line. So G.I. Joe Honor took place right after the first one, and brought in, the second cast, Airborne and Tripwire, some of those characters. And then, I got to throw in some favorites and play with some characters that you might not normally expect. So I had somebody like Shadow Tracker up here and stuff like that. So the third one was Body Count. And that was a lot of fun. Again, I'm expanding out more into that third generation. In fact, by the time I reached that story, I had situations where I had to introduce some new characters. So for the first time, I introduced 2 new characters in that story. And then I did, those works. Not sure what's going on there because that's not the right cover. But anyway, my fourth and final novel was Dishonor Thy Father. And that was, again, the fourth generation. I got Flint, Lady Jane, those characters. And each of those is about 350 single-spaced word pages. So there's quite a bit of writing going into that type of stuff. And quite frankly, I needed a break. So I did a couple shorter works right before JoeCon last year. Like, as we got in the car and started to drive to JoeCon last year, Buzzer came out. So Little Novella. What I did with the file card, when I used that as the inspiration, and to explore that one sentence about how he went from a Cambridge Don to a vicious biker. And that was kind of a scary project because I myself am a college professor and I had a lot of colleagues looking at me like, what are you trying to tell us, man? And some of the other things I've done, I was featured in this anthology, Ivy Frost, Tales of Mystery and Scientific Detection, which you can see here. And like Darryl said, it's been a great springboard for a lot of us to work with characters we're familiar with and then venture out into some other things and expand our writing repertoire. So I'm forever grateful to Kindle Worlds for making that possible. And I will pass it over to Don.
I think when I got into this, I was kind of late to the party. I attended that first panel in Springfield. I'd been writing for a couple of years in the G.I. Joe universe, but I hadn't really considered publishing it anywhere until my librarian wife encouraged me to put together an ebook. I had, at that time, no appreciation for what an ebook actually was. When this all started, I just wrote a short story, and some of my friends read that and enjoyed it and asked me what happened next. I said, well, nothing. It's a short story. It's over. And I said, no, really, what happens next? You can't leave us hanging. So it started as a blog, and every week or so I would put a new chapter up, and it was kind of like a serialized thing. We got to 20 chapters, and my wife encouraged me to publish it. So that began in 2010. It eventually was published on Smashwords, which was a precursor to before Kindle Worlds existed. I made it free because I didn't really have any interest in making a dime on it. I just wanted to put what I was doing out there for other fans to enjoy. Along the way, we went into volume 2 and 3. Took a really insanely long break before volume 4 was published just before Con last year.
All right. How's everybody doing? Enjoying Con so far? Don't lie, Chris. I know you're having a good time. My name is Justin Bell. I'm from Lebanon, New Hampshire. As the file card says, I've been buying G.I. Joe since 1982, right from the beginning. My favorite characters are Hit and Run and Interrogator. I got to say, it was a blast this morning watching that commercial seminar and seeing a real live action Interrogator we've never seen before, kind of kicking some butt. That was pretty cool. As far as writing inspirations, all sorts of things. I read a lot, I watch a lot of movies, action films, stuff like that, and of course G.I. Joe, since I was 8 years old, has inspired my creativity in some way, shape, or form. So it's definitely a big part of it. Originally, I wrote fanfic entitled The Price of Peace. I wrote that originally in the late 1990s. My wife was going to law school and I was working a night job and had a lot of time during the day, which I don't have now with 2 kids, but it was a different world back then. So I spent a lot of time writing some fanfic, which I had kind of posted to my website and let people read and enjoy. And that fanfic actually kicked off a whole series of what's called dial stories, which are essentially you take photographs of action figures in various poses or in sets, and you can add word balloons and kind of tell a story through photographs. I've always wanted to be a comic book writer, but I've never really had the opportunity to collaborate with anybody and kind of artistic person, and I certainly couldn't do that myself. So this allowed me to be that kind of comic book writer while using the action figures and sets to kind of tell the story. So The Price of Peace kind of helped get me to that point, and I spent about 14 years making dial stories. And right as I was starting to work on the final dial story is when Amazon announced the Kindle Worlds platform, and so I was able to work with them a little bit and take The Price of Peace and refine it, modify it, and get it uploaded to the Kindle Worlds platform. So I did that. That did very well. I was very happy with kind of how that all transpired. It really kind of sparked a little bit of creativity in me, and it was really kind of liberating and interesting to be able to put something on Amazon and see it published and see people downloading it and buying it and enjoying it. So, I've been writing for almost my entire life, and it just never occurred to me that there would actually be a way to take these works that are in my head and make them readily available for people to enjoy. And so after The Price of Peace, another thing that's really been inspiring to me about G.I. Joe is each new series of figures. I'm kind of a mass media junkie. I love enjoying the figures, but I also love seeing how the figures can tell a story. And I know when the 50th anniversary was introduced, we got little nuggets of story here and there. Some interviews at Comic-Con with Daryl and some of the half-writers that would just let these little nuggets drop at the squad and some different things like that that were on the file card. So I kind of took that and ran with it. And that first series, 50th anniversary figures, I kind of created a story called Welcome to Wolf Squad, which featured all of those characters in that story. And then I did the same thing for series 2. Little novellas. These are novellas, they're not full-blown novels. For series 2 it's called Nerves of Stone, where and it was really interesting taking all of these different disparate figures and trying to find one story that you could include all those different characters in and have it still make sense. But I really enjoyed doing that a lot, and I published those 2 novellas, and kind of to align with the release of those 2 series of figures. And because of that, that kind of was able to allow me to do some work with Fresh Monkey Fiction on their Eagle Force Kickstarter, which was a lot of fun. I was able to write some bios for some of the characters for the Eagle Force Handbook. I also was able to fulfill my lifelong desire of writing actual comics by writing some of those web comics that they used to promote the Kickstarter as well. So it's mostly because of my G.I. Joe work that they liked what I did there and asked me to come participate in that, which is very cool. It's kind of, it's been a dream of mine forever to have some kind of role in writing bios and stories for action figures that are actually being produced and made. So this is kind of a way to really, do something like that, which is very cool.
Justin, that Kickstarter that you wrote about is going on right now?
For Eagle Force?
Yeah.
No, Eagle Force was funded quite a while ago, but they're in the production phases now. They should be getting released soon. I believe there is a booth out in the showroom that's got some of the painted samples for Eagle Force out there.
Isn't there a Kickstarter?
But there is a Kickstarter for the handbook. Yes,
And you're doing the bios?
Yes, I'm doing the bios for the Eagle Force handbook. That Kickstarter is currently happening right now. Yes, it has been funded already, but we're still working with some stretch goals.
Yeah, the more stretch goals, the more Justin has to work, so throw in some money.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a stretch goal in there, I think, where I get to write a custom bio for you, so make that happen and see what we can do. And so it's kind of steamrolled from there, honestly. I first got a taste of publishing with Kindle Worlds, and since then I've actually published 25 different novels and novellas outside of the G.I. Joe universe. I've written my own kind of sci-fi thriller trilogy called Operation Harvest. I've written about 1.5 million words since then, sold 20,000 total books, and about 3.5 million page reads through Kindle Unlimited, which is a program Amazon has where people can pay a regular fee and download a book or pages for a book and read them for free. So it's tough for me to talk about how much Kindle Worlds has kind of changed my life in recent years. I've been making a decent amount of money publishing and writing right now, and all of that is pretty much due to Kindle Worlds, because I wouldn't have even started it if the Kindle Worlds program didn't exist. So I owe a lot to Daryl and whoever made that Amazon kind of G.I. Joe Kindle Worlds thing happen. So
Yeah, and that's the real architect of the arrangement with Amazon is the head of our publishing named Michael Kelly. And sometimes you'll see Michael Kelly on the press releases that go out for IDW or new initiatives. It was really, his vision that said, let's give this a shot, and came to me, said, this sounds great, and and let's get it going. But Michael gets a lot of credit for that. But Justin, that's amazing. Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah, how about it?
And like I said, there's still more to come. I was fortunate enough to get connected with a small publishing press called Maue Press, and to work with a guy named Mike Krause, who's been producing a series of post-apocalyptic novels, which was that Darkness Rises in that previous slide. And that is going to actually finish up in the 6th book next month, and then we're launching a next series called 0 Hour, and that's kind of a little preview of the cover that's going to be for 0 Hour Book 1. So still working at it, and very appreciative for Hasbro and for Amazon for allowing me to kind of, dip my toe in the publishing waters and then kind of get swallowed by the current.
I can't put my finger on it, but I seem to be the odd man out on this panel.
I'm with you too.
Thank you, Dan. I lodged a formal protest with Bill when he wanted to make this file card because he refused to make it look like an Adventure Team package. So I had to accept this real hero thing. But hi, I'm Jim Beard, and I am thrilled to death to be here. This is my first G.I. JoeCon, and from what I understand, it's my last G.I. JoeCon too. I drove down from Toledo, Ohio, just to be here for this panel. I'm very honored to be asked to be on it. My first G.I. Joe toy was the 1969 G.I. Joe astronaut in space capsule. I was 4.5 years old, and I threw up when I opened the package because I was so excited. I had the flu. It wasn't that bad. My favorite characters are, of course, the entire Adventure Team, Mike Power, and Bullet Man. My writing inspirations, I don't know how many people might recognize some of these names, but I consider myself a pulp writer. I'm writing in a classic pulp style most of the time, but adapting it to many different things, like G.I. Joe. Lester Dent is the main writer and creative force behind Doc Savage. Walter Gibson, Shadow, the force behind the Shadow. Norval Page, the person behind the character called the Spider. Hugh D. Cave wrote a lot of that weird mystery pulp stuff. And Will Murray is the current holder of the Doc Savage license, or he's the Doc Savage writer today, and he continues to be quite an inspiration to me, a very prolific man. I'm just so broken up about this Kindle Worlds thing. My bucket list for licensed fiction is pretty short, and the second highest one on that was the Adventure Team. It meant that much to me as a child. It's my favorite toys ever, bar none. And when I saw the G.I. Joe license open up, I got really excited. And then I thought, well, no, they're really pushing it as a real American hero thing by the way everything looked. But I said, what the heck? And I found on the press release there were two people from Hasbro. Their names are on there. I can't think of who they are right now, but I emailed them and I said, does this happen to mean anything from G.I. Joe, i.e. like the 70s stuff? And they emailed back pretty quickly and said, yes, everything except the one movie at that point. Look, what? So it took me a year to crawl up to this daunting task of finally getting to write my second highest licensed fiction on my bucket list. It took me a long time to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't have the luxury of 1,000 characters, who all have file cards and names, and they were college professors or whatever this thing was. But so it's actually pretty cool because I would have loved to have written that story if you had. So I wanted to, well, I didn't want to have 6 guys running around all named G.I. Joe like they were in the 70s, they were all G.I. Joe. But I decided I wanted each one to have an individual personality and a name and like a job. So I went to 2 things that I really loved as a kid, which were the G.I. Joe Adventure Team Viewmasters and the Peter Pan record sets. And I dug through those, and there's actually some individual names that those established. And not for all of the characters, but for some of them. And the other ones I made up names myself and gave them what their main job description was, and put them through their paces in a story that actually takes place in 1974. I used as much of the real G.I. Joe equipment that I could possibly use, and titled chapters with names of the sets and things like that. And so I'm very proud to say it was the very first use of the Adventure Team in the Kindle Worlds thing. And since that time, people have, I'll be kind, they jumped on that bandwagon, which is really great to see, actually. And what was cool is they did some different things than from what I did to use the Adventure Team. But they're, like it says up there, the original figures reimagined with unique names and personalities. I thought, no one is going to read this thing. Everybody on there wants Real American Hero, and that's cool. And I give Real American Hero so much credit for keeping the G.I. Joe flame alive. No one's going to read this thing. It's the Adventure Team. Who even knows what that is? And it turns out that it's been one of the highest reviewed Kindle Worlds G.I. Joe stories, and for that, to everybody who's bought it and read it and reviewed it, I'm very, very grateful. We went on to do a really cool project after the contest. Does everybody remember that there was a Kindle Worlds contest called G.I. Joe Legacy, where and Justin and Bill and Troy Osgood was in. We all have said the same thing, that we actually came together as a little team and a group of friends. Instead of being competitors against each other and rivals in this contest, we actually grew together and we said, hey, let's take those 4 characters that are in this contest and do this serialized story with them. So that was my second one. It's a short story. It kicks off with Adventure Team Marcus, and every short story jumps like 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. So that was a real thrill to have the character of Marcus almost get an action figure if it wasn't for this guy right here next to me. We won't go into that. And then, do I get another slide? There it is. A bunch of other stuff I've done. I've been very blessed to have been involved in other licensed fiction, and again, some of it on my bucket list. I'm the co-editor and contributor to an official Planet of the Apes anthology book called Tales from the Forbidden Zone. It's all classic Planet of the Apes. I wrote a Spider-Man novel, which was, again, very daunting and cool. I have an X-Files short story and an anthology. I wrote a Ghostbusters comic book. And then I have a lot of my own stuff, like Sergeant Janet's Spirit Breaker, which is about a ghost hunter, and the very first, as far as I can find, shared world giant monster anthology. All the stories are set in the same world. I am, again, so glad that I was able to be part of Kindle Worlds. I thank Kindle Worlds, Hasbro, anybody who is involved in that. It's just been one incredible experience. And I want to urge everybody, if you feel strongly about it, I don't know how much difference this will make, but tell Hasbro and tell Amazon how much, if you did, enjoy all the stuff that we were able to do. And we're kind of hoping that maybe there's some kind of life out there for these stories that already exist and maybe future ones. I have no idea what that would look like, but maybe if they hear from you guys, then maybe they'll do something with it. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe I'll address that, Jen.
Did I put you on
Before we go, no, actually, no, it's a good point. So can you guys address the ownership of the content, right? I think that's very important. As authors,
Yes.
you own the works.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
very specific that the story, those rights revert to us.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't own the characters and the concept, but the actual story, what happens, reverts back to us, so there is that.
So that's very important because those works can live on. So the authors have the ability to actually take these to publishers, right? So there is the potential now, right now, you'll be free, right? It reverts back to you from the Amazon platform. So these could live on. So our goal at Hasbro, our dream is that more of these things, exactly what you said, Jim, can happen because, fundamentally, I certainly believe, and I think there's a good number of people at Hasbro, that G.I. Joe is a universe of characters beloved by you, and creative input shouldn't stop. Like, we've opened up this opportunity. Tremendous works have happened. Characters have been brought into the official G.I. Joe canon from, your creations, your guys' creations, and that shouldn't stop and live on. So we don't know what other platforms are going to come down the road. Hopefully more things like this will officially open up. We don't have anything in the works right now, but because the ownership of the works reverts to the authors, they can, I think, live on. So it's to be determined if these, see light with another publisher someday. So.
About some of the collaboration that Jim mentioned earlier, but before that, I'm dying to know what the number one on the bucket list was. You said G.I. Joe was number two.
Oh yeah.
Batman 66.
Which is it?
Yeah, my number one bucket list of all time is to write an original Batman 66 novel.
And you did a collection of essays on it.
Yes, I have a book called Gotham City 14 Miles, which is the very first book of its kind about the TV show. Thank you, old Chuck.
One of the great things that we ended up doing with this platform was working with each other and building up each other's stories, which was just a fantastic opportunity. Jim mentioned G.I. Joe Legacy. What he didn't mention, and maybe Justin wants to talk about this, was how when he pitched it to us, he said, okay, I'm going to write a story, and I'm not going to tell you anything about it. And it's going to be published, let's say May 1st, and then you have a month. You have to publish yours June 1st. So you have to acquire it, read it, figure out what's going to happen next, go. Oh, by the way, I think we should set it 10 years in the future, but still tie into my story.
Just try and follow up the adventure team.
Yeah, that was the next thing he did. He set the bar really, really high and said, good luck, everybody. So I ended up taking the second one and building up an aspect of the story that he had set in the 70s. And then Justin followed and we let Troy close it off. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic experiment. It was really, it was a great way to kind of, stretch the creative muscle, so to speak, and focus on some of these unique characters that we kind of pulled out of our own universes. But I just thought, I fell in love with the format. It was a really cool idea, and of course, I got to set my story in the 90s, and I'm a 90s geek anyway when it comes to G.I. Joe, so I love doing that. But yeah, it's, the Adventure Team book was the 70s, then Bill did a book from the 80s, I took care of the 90s, and then Troy closed it off. But it was really awesome to kind of read some elements of earlier novels or novellas and kind of pull some little nuggets of stuff from there and be able to build your own little story out of it. So it was a really awesome format. And big kudos to Jim for coming up with that idea.
Thank you. You guys did, you took it somewhere that I, was far beyond what I hoped it would be. It was really fun to do, and credit to you guys for rolling with my little Marquis de Sade type of setup there.
Well, personally, I'm proud of you guys for doing this, and I think our point of view is that all time periods of G.I. Joe can make sense, kind of maybe in a grand unified theory way, if you guys know the reference to physics. But that there is one explanation that explains why you have all these different types of G.I. Joe groups that exist through time for different reasons. And in fact, my interest in this stretches back to when I published my book on the history of the 12-inch G.I. Joe. DC Comics approached me, and they knew about my interest in all of G.I. Joe, and asked me to actually write a treatment for them, what a new G.I. Joe story would be. This is when Devil's Due had not yet taken the licensing deal, so DC was interested in looking at a revival of G.I. Joe comics. And I wrote a treatment that basically put all generations of G.I. Joe into one continuity.
The Adventure Team?
The Adventure Team was in.
You're kidding me.
No. So it was
Thanks a lot, Daryl. Now I have to go home and cry about this.
It was a proposal. I will tell you, on the very first page of the comic book, I killed G.I. Joe Extreme. They ceased to exist. And then we went on with the rest of the story. But
it was your version of Crisis on Infinite Earths, right?
Exactly. That's great. That's a great metaphor. So, but the idea of bringing all of our all of the different groups into one continuity is a very compelling idea. And so my hat's off to you guys for actually making it happen. Obviously, that proposal, DC decided not to pursue a licensed story with G.I. Joe, and instead, I think they took on Star Trek or something. It's one of those things, huh? But anyway, my hat's off to you guys for the collaboration and the thinking.
Before we move off this slide, I want to call attention to the covers. Because the Kindle Worlds didn't give us a very big palette of covers to choose from. And I knew I was following up Jim.
They gave us no Adventure Team art.
Yeah, this is a problem. So we, internally, I knew we had a problem that, in fact, we were getting so many authors writing Joe that we didn't have enough variety of covers to truly differentiate everything. So while there's some cool designs in there, we were running out of steam. And it's something that we never got to create a unique style guide just for Kindle Worlds, drawing from everything. So my apologies to you guys for not, we didn't match your creative output with, an equal style guide.
The weird thing was that there was a 60s, or two, I think, 60s soldier G.I. Joe pieces of art in there. And then Adventure Team skipped over, so I had to use the scuba guy, which worked out just fine for my story.
Yeah, we didn't have then the treasure of historical assets that we do, that we recently built.
Well, and what was great was the creative ways in which, especially Jim, got around it. Because when I went to publish the second part of the story, I went looking for a cover to use, and so where did you get that sunset with the mountain? I'm going through all of the art, and I couldn't find it. And you wrote back and said, what? How did you?
I can't remember what package art that is. It is an extreme close-up. You're able to actually take the artwork that they have on in the gallery, and you can twist it and zoom in on it. And I don't remember what package. Do you guys remember what package that is?
You can see in Justin's in the lower right.
Yeah, there's a little
guy in a boat.
Yeah, but it worked out perfect because this was set on, or mine at least was set on, no, they were all set on that island, that one island, yeah, throughout the years. But yeah, just to zoom in on that, that's pretty cool. It's like we planned it.
And so last year, when we set up the Kindle Worlds panel, it was myself, Don, and Wes, you came up with the idea of kind of crowdsourcing a story, kind of soliciting stuff from the audience. What characters do you want to see? What kind of situations do you want to see? And so you kind of held a poll after that?
I don't remember whose idea it was. I remember the three of us settled on it really quickly though, because it sounded like a lot of fun. We went out of our way to limit talking about ourselves to just the first half of the panel, because we wanted the maximum amount of time to involve the audience and hear you guys pitch. What do you want to see? What is it that you want to read about? What characters have you always wanted a book about but nobody's ever written? And we sat up here with 3x5 cards just scribbling, and it was a great amount of fun afterwards, dividing up characters like we were picking 3 kickball teams or something like that. Trying to figure out how we followed the same kind of thing where I think Wes's story began in 1979. Mine took place during the Real American Hero era, and then Bill finished it off with a modern era. So there was a decade or so in between each of the stories, and we had a blast with it. We used characters that don't see a lot of exposure. And that's something that's always appealed to me. You probably will never see me write a lot of Snake Eyes or Duke fiction because I feel like that's been done. I feel like those stories have been told. I want to write about folks that we don't really know much about other than their file card, and we got to do a lot of that.
And it was just tremendous. Who's responsible for that? So do you want to stand up? And I guess it was his idea. So. That was and we stole the we stole the legacy idea or the title. We figured that we could start a thing in Kindle Worlds where if we were going to do these collaborations, that would be kind of the way to alert readers that that's the case. And yeah, for me it was really fun. I got assigned Sightline, this character again. I know Justin had written a story about him, but I hadn't really explored a lot. This was my first person novel, and it's. I've been doing all my stuff in the early 80s, so I got to do this modern. They had, guns that are used now, and cell phones, and satellites, and things like that. And what I did was, because Wes set his in the late 70s with Dr. Venom, where Cobra was kind of first starting out, and then Don took kind of the smack dab in the middle of the Real American Hero era. I got to write a story as if that had all continued, and Snake Eyes is retired, and I used all new characters, and characters that have come out in the last 3 or 4 years. So, I was writing about characters that I had never thought of or done anything with before. And we wanted to give a real quick shout out to Davis Grayson, who came with the idea of the Cuban October Guard team that we used, and he published his book like 13 and a half minutes before the submission. He was the last person to get under the wire before Kindle Worlds stopped taking submissions. So if you haven't checked his out yet, definitely do so. And then it's kind of a coming out party today for Joy of Joe, so I'll let Jim talk about that.
High on my non-fiction bucket list was to do a book about G.I. Joe, but to really try to get back to the roots of the toy, and just that, to write about playing with G.I. Joe as children, and the joy that we all have felt and still do feel, hopefully, about the toy. The book is 30 different writers all talking about their childhoods playing with G.I. Joe. There's a lot of really great anecdotes in it. I'm to understand that some of the stories make you cry. And it's a lot of fun. It covers every era of G.I. Joe, from the 12-inch soldiers in the 60s through the Adventure Team G, and all the way up through Real American Hero. I would say it's probably mostly, not mostly, a lot of Real American Hero stuff.
I hear you talk about Sigma 6, believe it or not.
But our intention was to show that no matter when these writers were kids, no matter what year it was and what was going on, that there was this common thread that went through their stories, which is the joy from playing with this toy. This is another one of these projects that when we put it out there, and it's become something far more than I imagined it would be. We've been getting incredible feedback on it, and people seeing themselves themselves in a lot of the anecdotes and stories in here. We have some really great writers in it. Not only do we have Justin and Bill and myself are the editors, but we all have essays in it about our own childhoods. But we have some really prominent writers like comic book legend Paul Kupperberg, comic book legend Fabian, I'm going to massacre his name, Nikiza or Nichiza or Nikaiza. What is it?
Nacesia.
I really
Yeah.
considered that one. The co-creator of Deadpool and Cable is actually in this book talking about his childhood playing with G.I. Joe. We have Carson Matakis, who is here this weekend. He's in the book. And some really, really cool stories. And some of the people actually talked about how it informed things that they did later on in life, which is really cool that they, G.I. Joe has been with them. G.I. Joe is there all through their lives. We're actually debuting the book right here at the show, and we hope that everybody sees what we're trying to do with it, and they feel the joy, because the joy is real.
You said that the first 5 people who purchased one from you?
Yeah, I've got several copies with me. If anybody's interested, they're just $10 a piece. We're going to step outside out there, and if you want, 3 of us here that can sign it. And I actually have 6 special Mystery of the Sunken Tomb bookmarks for the first 6 copies that you can get free.
And we're gonna kind of mill about out here and
Yeah, just
answer
right
questions about any of our works or Kindle Works or anything we can do. Now, I had kind of bribed a number of you into coming here and promised a really, really big prize. And I have to stand behind that because you all know who I am and where to find me. So if you ended up getting a raffle ticket at some point over the weekend, go ahead and take that out. I would say that you're going to need that at some point. Somebody's going to walk away with a lot of interesting gifts, and to do the drawing, we need to bring up a very special guest. Starting to give it away. Okay, one of the gifts is going to be a copy of Joy of Joe. But why don't we bring up our special guest? Does everybody know Marauder John? Has everybody checked out his booth at the time? If you have not, then immediately after you visit Jimmy, you get this book. It's a very special thing. So I'm going to let him draw so that when my wife wins, it doesn't look suspicious. And you'll see why in a second. Hold on. I'm sorry. We're going to play. Can everybody still hear me? This doesn't.
No, I can't hear.
All right, we're going to play a really special game because I'm assuming a lot of the tickets we gave away, people didn't come, and I'm assuming a lot of people lost them. So we're going to see the over/under on how many we draw before we get a winner. I'm thinking 7. What do you think? Under or over?
Under. We're going to get it on the first one.
All right. So every time he picks one out and we don't get a winner, we're all going to count 1. All right, get your tickets out. Here we go.
Get our glasses on.
668274. Shit.
Yeah! See?
Okay. All right, you got the.
All right. By the way, Bill's wife is dressed up like the action figure that won the contest.
Yeah.
Further, rub it in my face and Justin's face. Thank God Troy's not here. He'd be, just a quivering mass of down on the floor. Troy would be.
Okay, so a number of awards. The first one is a signed copy of The Joy of Joe.
Yeah.
One of you guys first in line for the 6 with the bookmarks. Hold on. No. You're,
Oh, you get more.
this is going to be.
Yeah. You might want to get a card.
Actually, this isn't on the slide, but my son made a little Cobra thing. He said I had to give it away, so big thanks to my son. The second book is Sausage Robot Stories, which features both Beard and Bell up here. I think they both signed it.
Yeah.
We're building up. Justin talked about his series, Fog of Dreams. Okay, if you haven't checked that out, it's available, so you know how to check that out. He's going to have a lot of recommendations for you. And I had mentioned that I had contributed a short story to this anthology, Ivy Frost. So he's got a copy of that.
All right. Awesome. The collected works.
Now we have the mystery of it. This is the one that I promised is going to blow everyone away. This is the reason he's going to get bugged in the parking lot. Did you want to do this?
No, go for it.
I'm handing him the certificate of authenticity. Again, you've all been by the booth. You've seen the wonderful things that he's been doing. How many people invested in that Kickstarter? Woo! How many of you have the exosuit prototype in your collection? Okay, and the reason that is happening, he's going to get one more thing. Before the paperbacks are released, we talked about doing a very limited 25 edition hardcover run of the first Marauder Task Force novel. It's not official cover art, but that's coming very soon. It will be available on the Marauder site, and it is being written by me.
All right. Crummy commercial. All right. Words of revelation. Thank you.
I'll drink that Ovaltine all day long.
So, I want to thank everybody. Thank you guys. I hope you'll continue writing. I hope anybody here who has an interest in writing can be inspired by this amazing crew. Once you start writing, it's something you never stop. You always want to get back to it. It's so satisfying. So I hope everybody is inspired as I am from what you guys have done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.